Brian Brennan. He's just published a new book called Alberta Originals, a collection of stories of Albertans who've made a difference. He says that when it comes to important Canadians, we don't need to look much farther than our very own backyards. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Ted.
And you were saying off camera just during the commercial, it only took you 2.5 months to put this together.
That's right, yeah. I was, the publisher wanted to have a sequel to a similar book that I published last year, and so about 2.5 months.
That's pretty quick.
That's a lot of work.
And it's certainly, I was flipping through it on the weekend, and of course being a closet sports geek, I of course went to all the sports names of the stadiums. Burns Stadium for Pat Burns, Max Bell Arena for Max Bell, McMahon Stadium for Frank McMahon. It's literally a who's who of the province.
Yes, and a lot of these names that of course that we know, as you say, McMahon Stadium, we don't necessarily know the person behind the name. And it's always interesting to find out the little stories about them. Like Max Bell, for example, whose name is on an arena and also on the theaters and other institutes. Apparently, he had a real taste for ice cream. Oh. So he would sit in his suite in the Palliser Hotel, and when his distinguished colleagues were having their rye and Coke and so on, he would order up 3 flavors of ice cream in the one dish. That was his.
That was his indulgence.
That was his indulgence.
Oh,
yeah.
Good stuff. Now,
Right.
is there one story that really stands out for you in particular that's really kind of stuck in your head?
Well, the one that really fascinated me was this man Morris Two Gun Cohen, who, because he punched out a robber in a Chinese restaurant, ended up endearing himself to the Chinese community and ended up over in China as a bodyguard for Sun Yat-sen. And then he came back and forth between Canada and China and became, he was considered by the Canadian newspapers to be quite an expert on China. The irony was that he didn't speak Chinese.
He was faking it all this time.
Pretty well. He wrote a biography at the end which turned out to be totally bogus, fictitious.
Really?
As a matter of fact, it wasn't until a New York writer came along in the 1990s and did some investigation that we discovered that this man was a great spinner of tall tales.
Now, speaking of, well, I shouldn't preface it this way, but at the opening remarks of your book, you're saying he probably won't appreciate it, but Ralph Klein can be compared to William Bible Bill Aberhart.
Right.
Touch on that for us.
Well, they were both broadcasters, for example. They came out of a broadcasting. Mind you, Aberhart was perhaps only a broadcaster in the sense that he was a preacher on the radio. He wasn't a full-time broadcaster, and but they were very charismatic individuals, larger-than-life individuals, and interestingly enough, both of them took their economic cues from people named Douglas. Oh. In the case of Mr. Klein, it was the Professor Douglas in New Zealand, and in the case of Aberhart, it was a Scottish electrical engineer of all things named Roger Douglas, who had this theory of social credit, which was the first government anywhere in the world ever to bring in a social credit government, and it was going to cure all the ills of the Depression, supposedly, but didn't really work out that way.
This is Brian Brennan. He's the author of Alberta Originals, Stories of Albertans Who Have Made a Difference. A great read. I was flipping through it on the weekend. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Thank you, Ted.